Hi, everyone. And it's a beautiful Sunday in Ottawa, especially after the long rains, and it's quite sunny outside. So I'm live on my own today. I didn't ask anyone to join in, being a lovely day, and everyone could also go and watch the recording. So my name is Rola Tibshirani, and as I mentioned, I live in Ottawa. I teach at All Saints High School in Kanata, grade 7 French immersion with the Ottawa Catholic School Board. So I am sharing my Math PD learning. It's been an interesting last 3 years, focusing on the social emotional learning through the design thinking process. So I'm just going to share the screen now, and I'll share all my learning from this year's grade 7s. Whoops, I'm going to stop sharing and go back to sharing again. Let's do that. And open. Let's try that again. I don't know why it's doing this, but I am hoping that you can see my screen and you could see the presentation. So I'm just going to present here, and hopefully everything is working fine. Here we go. I'm just going to present. Okay, so the design thinking process is based on empathy for problem solving, exploring the process of building relationships with the students to take ownerships and value thinking for designing. So there's no significant learning occurs if without a significant relationship. So the design thinking process is all about empathy. It's all about the community of learning as well, and making a difference. But there's no significant learning if that relationship is not taking place in the classroom. The classroom environment is the essence of the design thinking process. It's building that relationship to empower learning. And if there's no relationships among the students, there's no empathy for designing. It is the visible learning through that collaborative learning space that is really important, and having students' voices also matter in the setting up of that space to further learning. Now, we already know that there are many designing thinking process out there, and there are many that are very successful, being applicable from around the world, and the most practical one is Launch the Book, because it has not only the process itself, but it speaks to the classroom messiness and the learning and how it takes place. So I'm sharing a couple, three with you here, and the first one is from Nuovo School, which is by Kim Sachs. It's very similar, and of course you already know the Stanford Deep Design Thinking for Learning. And I have been using class with Mary Cantwell, her work on deep designing thinking. And the reason I chose that, because she sets the problem first, and then you empathize. After you discover the problem, you collect the data, you empathize, and then you go through that process. So there are many out there, very well-known people who have been doing the studies, and many, it's being applied all around the world. So the focus today is actually on the collaborative piece of the design thinking, and how does that look like in a classroom. And of course it's messy, and part of that learning is that messiness, but also having to reflect and really build those deep learning skills. The culture of safety. The culture of safety is very important, where students can take risks, where equitable voices matter, and it's a place for an environment to really reach higher order thinking. And building that, co-constructing that environment, and having students really make meaning through that co-learning, that through that collaborative environment, co-constructing, co-building, co-making, co-creating, co-regulating is really important as well, which we're focusing on the social emotional learning, what I have developed a little bit further this year with my students. So we have really focused a lot on the brain building, and what does the brain, how does our brain work at the age, and about the gray matter. So the brain builds and transfers that creative learning, and the neuroplasticity that will never be forgotten, and really pruning the things we need to get away with, and making space for all that new learning that is never going to be forgetful. So we spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year building that collaborative classroom, and really to be active listeners. That is the key to collaboration, and really be active listeners as well as valuing each other's thinking. If we cannot value each other's thinking, we're not going to be able to collaborate, to build that relationship, to trust each other's, develop those communication skills. How open-ended questions? How do you ask questions? How do you agree? How do you disagree? How do you value each other's thinking? How do you choose from each other the value of the thinking? And the key to this success, obviously, is the reflective process. So being a reflective learners, being receptive for feedback, understand how we learn, determine learning strategies, and believe in making a difference. So it really took us a little bit longer this year because we are a feeder school, and we have students coming from 5 different schools and more than that sometimes. And so bringing that community, it does take time, and that is the key to really the successful part in the designing thinking. So as we do the brain study, and we know that the dopamine in the brain are active when students are engaged with clear goals and collaborating and engaging in the conversations by analyzing, getting feedback. So that really empowers and motivates them to learn, but also really having to go through that process together and learn how to work with it. So a lot goes on into the classroom through the learning process. So the initial process is building that community. I have many activities I have done, and I haven't blogged as much as I have previous years about the early in the year, but very similar to my older posts on my blog. So we do a lot of the 6-word story of their names, and that is really the key of getting that community building. And we learn together that empathy interview with each other. So through that process, not only that we are setting for the design thinking process, but also learning to empathize with others. So we ask, how do you ask about challenges that they are facing? What are open-ended questions? And so accessing each other's stories of emotion. So we start sometimes by just a very simple thing. Let's each bring our school bag in, and you have an empathy interview with each other. So what is it that you would like to change in your school bag? What are the challenges? And we build on that until we become very personal with it and really build that community and getting to know each other really well. So the reflection really is the key to this process. And we try with the 50 minutes blocks, we have short blocks, and I only have the one class that's really back to back, like for 2 blocks, twice a week only. So that reflection piece, even you have to let go of content at some point, and this is the key to the success, is that reflective piece. And so what were your favorite things about this activity? How did it go? How was that activity making you feel? So this year we're focusing a lot on the social emotional learning. We looked at our learning differences as well, and that is the key, because we all come with a different backpack of experiences from previous classroom experiences. So that is the key, is how is this activity making you feel and why, and unpacking that as a team. I'll share that a little bit further down. So what would you change about that activity also if you could change something? So giving them that equitable voice and that thinking and that social emotional learning, that they matter in this process, is the key to success as well. So it does take that relationship and culture building. And so we look about also the unlearning. So we come with so much in our backpack from previous experiences, and so many misconceptions and thinking errors that we bring with us. So what goes wrong and why, and how are those thinking errors? You have to prune your brain, and you really have to make room for new habits and letting go and documenting those habits. So we spend quite a few weeks on our thinking errors, and I also have thinking errors, and I share my thinking errors with them, and we all just document and reflect together about it. So these are just some of the examples that we talk about with the thinking errors. So this is a blog post that I wrote about the thinking errors, and it was interesting to really have them document all the way through. So we use the thinking the ladder of inference as a thinking model for us. And so we documented those thinking errors all the way through, interpreting the data, coming up to inclusion, and setting up our next step as well. So that's the key. The key is really, it's just like the design thinking process and building that relationship. The key is actually setting those important moments through the process to really develop that community of designers and community of empathetic postures and learning that they need to go along. And of course, students need to also unpack what is communication, what is active listening, how do we do that? So we co-construct a lot of criteria, and so we talk about the power of words and how we use words with each others. What do we do with that? And what is an effective communicator? How do you tell me more? What can you add on? A new suggestion? What do you think? So those are the kind of important base that the students need. So we also co-create our own empathy map as we do our own empathy interviews at the beginning of the year. And that is really a key for collaboration, building that relationship, that trust. So what are the defining words that are being said by your friends? What actions did you notice from them? What might your colleague be thinking, or connections or beliefs? And what kind of emotion do they feel? Bringing that awareness, it really becomes also building that relationship, becoming a team. So we do a lot of circle time. We use so many strategies and tools, and I develop those with them as we go along and depending on our needs. But the main thing really have been working right now is really appreciating each other every day with our reflection. Who helped you learn? We each have roles in our teamwork as well, and thanking them. Who are you thanking today that made a difference in your learning? And excusing any misbehavior that came out of you to the others. So that trust of openness and appreciation and growth mindset, it sets that tone for successful relationship in learning as well. So then we also have these we have the stickies that every day on a daily basis that we go up, and when we thank someone for making a difference in our team. So every class have their chart and they set their notes. So this is an example of a student. She's saying here, I'm improving my learning because at the beginning of the year, I was afraid of asking questions, but now I always ask questions, and I know that is learning, and I take notes, better notes, and I am sorry. I apologize for my team when I'm being distracting and not keeping them on task, and so on. So those are the kind of really important moments in the learning process. So the collaboration is about interpersonal and intrapersonal. I always give them a chance to think for themselves first before we jump in and change our mindset or our learning. And that is really a key, very important key for collaboration. So the design thinking is a framework that values listening, being active listener, and giving feedback, and it's that empathy among each others as well, being empathetic about who the end user is after we've collected the data. So it really bring that community, and it's all about iteration and ideation, and how many times we change our ideas. That perseverance piece is the key. So having that trust and the relationship and that collaborative thinking mindset really guides, because their kids are so supportive with each other when things are not working, and they become such problem solvers that that's the key to success. So understanding the impact of the decisions, it's not just to decide, but also to really focus on the equity of voices. This is also another link to the design thinking process here that I have shared. So we have just recently completed about the wild bird sanctuary, because we were on our walk when we were doing our biodiversity learning near the school. And so we saw they saw a dead bird and what happens to dead birds and so on. That led to a lot of designing thinking. Right now, the students are so it's a lot of fit cross-disciplinary as well. And so on structures, we are trying to reintegrate the interdependence at the beaver pond, and we're looking at what can we build for structures to really bring the animals back. And the kids are also so keen on building that process. So, and they're doing a lot of things also within like the community work. So what from the global goals, not only we're doing climate change for the cafeteria, but also they have done on biodiversity with sustainable global goals. Also, they are now picking their own passion with it, and what can they make a difference in their community with their global, the sustainable global goals. So I always give them time to write first. They trust themselves, and then they share and they value each other thinking, and they connect all that learning. So those big whiteboards have been really helpful and a huge learning in the classroom. So really developing the trust and really reflecting on the thinking. So making thinking visible. How am I thinking and behaving in a new way? So reacting to also the process. And so those are a lot of the questions that we developed, which previous learning that I had to let go that was getting in the way of my thinking and behaving. What challenges do I still identify in building a trust with my team? So those are the key questions. So the kids have done a lot of Flipgrids in teams. They face each other with that. And we've done a lot of reflection. We collect data. We try and do a Flipgrid the beginning of the week and the end of the week and see how that goes regarding next steps. And I can see the time. Usually I stick to 15 minutes, but I know that I wanted to really persevere longer this time and share a little bit more. So social emotional learning is really important. And with the social emotional learning is the key is the competencies of the deep learning, is deepening the learning by enabling students to transfer the learning. So it's not just about the design process itself and the empathy, but also how are they transferring and reflecting on the progressions of their learning. So we always bring in the global competencies, and the students develop that empathy and the compassion for each other, and they truly grow. Like the huge difference in the reflections is unreal. And I love reading the reflections on a daily basis. And especially the parents are finding that. I've had parents come for an interview by saying, I'm here just to thank you for all the changes that my child is really focusing and learning on. So it does work, and it does make a difference. So these are some of the processes. The process, obviously, it's long and messy, but the students are documenting all that process, and they are really reflecting from the problem to the valuing each other's thinking to the whole learning process. So these are all on my blog post, but I think we'll probably be sharing the links later on. So the empathy map is a huge piece of it. Not only we build that empathy map with each other at the beginning of the year, but any project that they're doing, they constantly right away build that empathy map. And this empathy map here, this empathy canvas, I like because it's broken down, and you can have many guided open-ended questions to this empathy map. And so now they're doing the climate change for the school and looking at the cafeteria and students' habits, and they've just collected documenting all that data, and now they're just going to be taking action. So meaning making for the learning. And so it's really making meaning. That's the key to the whole process. So the students need to see what is in it for them and how can they be the ones owning the learning. So it's a lot of the mental models, which we call the integrative thinking piece. So it's designing thinking is a process, but then you have all these other layers, like the thinking models that you have to bring in. And I use the Rotman thinking models, and also there's visible thinking routines. So what happens when the students are having to, how are they when they come to opposing ideas, or when they come up to a bad idea, how do they turn a bad idea to be creative? How do they do the causal model and all that work? So we look at ignoring the limitations and challenges of the assumptions. We need to accept that learning is prototyping, and I am learning with them. I'm prototyping on a daily basis based on empathy, based on what we are doing together, based on the social emotional reactions we're getting, based on how we are learning, how we are taking context. So it's relationship and having students carry that empathy posture for life. So finishing up by James B. Comer. While most of today's jobs do not require great intelligence, they do require greater frustration tolerance, personal discipline, organization management, and interpersonal skills. That is the key. It's building that relationship, building those interpersonal skills, because that is a really very important part of learning. So I'm just going to go on my other laptop and see if anyone has been watching live or they're watching right now, and see if there are any questions. So I'm just going to exit here. And let's see how this come out. If you have any further questions, you could always reach for me. And I'm just going to mute this. And here we go. So Carol is on. Yeah, so thank you for, I see Carol. Thank you, Carol and Lisa, for coming on a beautiful Sunday and taking the time to do this. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the Hangout. And here we go. So thank you so much. And please do reach for me. I enjoy learning. I'm not the expert, obviously. And the students are actually my experts, and we learn together. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon. Bye.